Uh, Namaste, Malaji. Welcome to this talk, which is around mental health on the occasion of Mental Health Day. Uh, I'll just start with a quick introduction of Dr. Mala Kapadia. She's a professor and director of wellness practice and resident mentor at Rashram School of Public Leadership. She has master's and doctorate in literature. She's also a writer, international speaker, executive coach, integrating yoga and Ayurveda. She's previously served as an adjunct professor at SPGen School of Global Management in Dubai, Singapore, Sydney, and Mumbai. She's been a researcher in the area of holistic well-being and integrated intelligence for more than 30 years. And she's also author of several books, including Hard Skills, Emotional Intelligence, and for Work and Life. She's been a pioneer teacher of emotional intelligence to MBA students in integrated institutions in Asia. She's also been a founder of human potential consulting named Tame the Monkey. So with that, I would like to welcome you. We couldn't have a better speaker for today than you, Malaji. So thanks for your time. So let me start with my first question, which is around the stigma attached to mental health. You know, when it comes to health, if you look at physical health and mental health, actually mental health is related to diseases related to brain. So brain is also an organ like anything else. But when it comes to other diseases like I have a cold or I'm feeling stomach ache, we are much more open about talking about it. Whereas when it comes to mental health, there's a lot of stigma attached to it, and there's a taboo, and people try to not are not able to express it as openly. So let's start with that as a question. What do you think is the challenge around treating mental health as any other health topic?
Thank you, Nirmalaji, for the introduction and the invitation here today. And this is a wonderful question to begin with, because there is a lot of misconception about mental health. Let's begin with the term first itself. The health care, as we call it, about physical care, also is more about sickness. It's not about health. Unfortunately, from the West, when the concept of health and therefore physical or mental has come to India, we have also accepted their way of looking at health. And their definition of health revolves around absence of disease. There is no absolute definition of health. When we look at India and Indian medical history, we have given to the world Ayurveda, which is the first, I would say, a medical, not just medical, but a grantha or a shastra on how to live life, which is so holistic that physical health and mental health are also integrated in it as one concept of health. So therefore, when we look at mental health, unfortunately, the moment we hear the word mental health, as you rightly said, there is a stigma, because people think of it as something is wrong with my mind, something is wrong with my head. The science of psychology from the West also came from this negative understanding, right? I mean, there was no science of a healthy mind. The science of psychology also came up only by looking at abnormal people. And their entire path to treatment and dealing with it has been negative, and therefore the stigma attached with it. However, when we look at our Indian way of looking at mind, it's absolutely as simple a flow of body to mind. And therefore, any problem with the mind, if at all, is not looked in negatively when we look at our ancient literature. And also the way of how do I develop a healthy body and how do I develop a healthy mind. That's the integrated definition of health in Ayurveda by Sushruta. So the stigma would not have been there if our journey had taken the first step from it as a positive science. And therefore, what has happened, I mean, when adults around you do not look at mental health in a positive way. I mean, as a child, every child would have heard this: don't be angry. Or if you are a first child and there is a second sibling, whether you are 2-year young or a 3-year young child, you suddenly become the older one. And there is bound to be jealousy, because obviously all that was only yours, you now have to share with the some other person. And then if there is jealousy or if there is anger, all that the child hears is, don't be angry, don't be jealous. But nobody teaches the child, why is the anger coming? Where is the jealousy coming from? How to deal with the emotion, right? I mean, how to deal with negative emotions, it's all a trial and error in everyone's life. And therefore, what has unfortunately happened is that how to be happy, how to live happily has now become Harvard courses, and we have ministries of happiness around the world because we have stopped being happy in a natural way.
Correct. That's a very, very nice insight into the health. It's a holistic being. It's nothing. It's not a specialized science. It's part of your being. You know how to be happy, and yeah. It's very ironic that there has to be a ministry to talk about
Exactly.
happiness when happiness should be the fundamental of the human life. It should be actually part of the way we live. So that's a very, very wonderful insight.
In
So in
fact, Nirmalaji, if you look at the word healthy also, if you divide it, it is heal, die.
yeah,
So it's all about healing your own self, right? It's
yeah,
if something is broken, you just fix it properly or you stitch it up,
yeah.
right? And it can become seamless again when it comes to our own body or mind.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for that. In terms of responsibility of loved ones or the people around a person who needs help in the low time of his mental health, what do you think? How can a loved one help? Because as I said, it's not as people may not open up, or you may not actually see the signs. So how do you think a loved one or a close relative a relative or a friend can help in such times?
Sure. See, that's exactly where when you begin with without sigma, right? I mean, when, as you rightly said, if I have a headache and I'm able to tell a friend or a colleague that I have a headache or I have fever, the same way I'm able to identify my sadness or grief, and my sadness or grief getting into depression or anxiety. If I'm able to know, first of all, understand my emotions, label them, and then talk about it, as if it's very normal. Because this again, I think really that our Indian knowledge system is so beautiful. We have never tapped into it, even in the field of psychology. We all think that the idea of mental health or emotional intelligence has come from the West. They may have popularized it, but if you look at our own life, Bhagavad Gita has been a part of most of us, right? I mean, even growing up years, I still remember my father chanting shloks from Bhagavad Gita, and especially the one Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha, Sammohat Smriti Vibhramash. And this is exactly the definition or progression of how anger from a small anger can become rage and make us do things that we regret later, because our buddhi or intelligence gets covered because of our anger. Now, if we understand this at home, not by just reciting Bhagavad Gita, every Indian household would know of such spiritual books, right, which we talk about at home. However, if we start applying them at home, and you rightly asked that what are the signs, the moment we pay attention first to our own signs and also to signs of other people, right? Unfortunately, what has happened, okay, all these masks have recently come out that we can see because of the corona pandemic. However, most of us learn to wear a mask as we grow up, because the moment you have a negative emotion, when you come home and or you talk about it or you throw a tantrum, you are rejected, you are invalidated. So slowly in our growing up years, what happens is that we learn to mask our emotions. And when we mask, when you look at the word emotion, again, if you put a hyphen and divide the word, it is energy that motivates. So if every emotion is an energy, and we know scientifically, energy can't be created, energy can't be destroyed. So even if there is sadness which is leading to depression, or anger which is leading to rage, or too much anger when repressed also creates a lot of negative mental health issues. They all give us a sign, and if people around us, especially our friend circle, our family, if they are able to pick up those signals, we stop smiling, right? We look lost. We may communicate less, or when we talk, maybe suddenly we are very abrupt in our expression. There are so many signs. Many people stop eating, many people overeat. So, I mean, the signs, you just have to be paying little more attention. Unfortunately, what has happened today, that though we are in a family, but very rarely we are connected at a very deeper level. Or on Facebook, people may have like 1,000+ friends, and they may be getting a lot of likes, but they do not have deeper relationship. And therefore, when you don't have deeper relationship, nobody is taking time for each other to remove that mask. That, are you hiding something? Are are you okay? You can talk. That comfort. And this is what is called psychological safety. Only when I feel safe with you will I open up. So, creating that deep connections in a relationship, whether it is family or your colleagues at work or your friends, but creating that deep relationship where we are able to understand the person and pick up those signals is very important.
That's very true. That's very true. I think, like you said, because of the social media, we have all have maybe started living two lives. One is what we project, the best photograph, the best moment, the
Right.
best food we eat, and that becomes, I mean, I've also read that because of the social media lives, people have started comparing their regular lives to other people's social media lives, which
Exactly.
obviously is the best version of yourself, and then that has also led to maybe tripling of suicide rates and depression and so on and so forth. So coming back to then, how do we really what is the role of the society or the media or the creative industry for that matter? Also, a lot of times you see that people with mental illness are actually made fun of, or they are shown to actually create funny scenes, which is not, it's very insensitive sometimes, and obviously, so how do you think, because some of these also lead to some beliefs that are become very common in the society. So media, the way they report suicides, for example, there is a WHO guideline in terms of how a suicide should also be reported, because there is a statistics that says that with every news of suicide, the other suicides actually rates surge up. So what do you think is the responsibility of the media, the society as at large, to deal with such menace?
Very true, Nirmalaji. I really find it's very unfortunate that somewhere as we as individuals start becoming numb. I mean, in emotional intelligence, why emotional intelligence is the middle path? Because on one side there is emotional numbness, and another side there is emotional hijacking. What happens is that there is so much pain around us, right? There could be a war, or there could be famine, there are hurricanes, climate change, and we don't realize, but WHO has been releasing a lot of reports on how climate change also affects our mental health. So, not just people who are getting affected, but imagine we are having our dinner and we are watching television news of either a terrorist attack, or a flood taking away people, or homelessness because of the wildfires in Australia or California. There is so much pain around us that it's impossible for a sensitive human being to be able to absorb so much pain, right? Even suicide news, they become like a public domain gossip, right? It's very sad that the dignity of somebody's death is also taken away when it goes to media. And we start becoming so insensitive. We all would have gone to dentist and taken anesthetic injections to stay away from pain, right? However, what happens at that moment, post treatment when the dentist says, okay, now you can have ice creams and milkshakes because that will soothe you out. And even our best flavor of ice cream at that moment, we don't enjoy. We don't enjoy because we have become numb, right? And the same numbness, the physical numbness, we have been experiencing at emotional and mental level for so many years. It's difficult to cope with the pain in the world, which is getting so magnified because of media, right? So that emotional numbness actually makes us numb not only to our own crisis, but crisis on any other friend around us or our family member. Or the other extreme is that emotional hijacking. On the highway, even if somebody overtakes you, you get into a rage and you want to bang that person's car, or you want to get into a physical fight by stopping that person on highway. So we are usually pendulating, like it's like a pendulum. Either there is too much emotional numbness or there is too much emotional hijacking. And this is where I think media, and especially creative media, can play a great role by not stereotyping mental health issues. You rightly said that, we, especially the films, would stereotype, right? I mean, somebody with depression or somebody with anger issues, or, somebody who's unable to get connected at an emotional level. Uh, when we stereotype them and we make fun of them instead of understanding, especially if you go to see a lot of introverted people. I mean, there are psychometric assessments that tell you that whether you are an introvert or an extrovert. But extroversion is so much a very accepted way of living, because these are the people whom the external environment gives energy. And therefore, talking, connecting, going to a party, enjoying your life, this gives you energy, and you want to live up to that standard set by extroverted people in the society. And this is where introverted people find it very difficult to cope, because introverted people are those, and I'm sure even if there are not exactly 50-50, but there are many introverted people in this world who get more energy by staying within themselves, by reflection, by reading a good book, by listening to music, or staying connected only with a small group of friends, right? But the stereotype of media is that you must be going to parties. If all your friends are having alcohol or dancing or into drugs, then you start doing that only to get acceptance by them. And that creates that split within. And many people we see around are living such split personalities, split lives. And therefore being honest to yourself that, okay, who am I? First learn to understand who you are, and start accepting yourself, start enjoying yourself the way you are, and then let the other people, let the world learn to accept you and enjoy your company.
Oh, that's a wonderful, wonderful way of putting that. Knowing yourself is such a fundamental uh, uh, thing about your, living your real life. Not a life that others people want you to live, or what other you see it on the social media. I think that's also a very important point that you mentioned about what you consume. Like we say, for a healthy living, physical healthy living, you need to eat the right food. It's a similarly for a healthy mind, you need to consume the right news. Too much negativity, too much, and obviously we know that media have to survive, so they have to create drama. But we don't necessarily need that much drama. It's like having fast food, right? I mean, we don't need that much fast food for our mind, which will actually create a havoc with our system. So we need to find our solitude and our quiet times, and getting connection to ourselves, and so on. So that's a very good point. So coming back to the next, I think the related thing that when you are going through this low period, doing anything becomes a chore, right? Because you don't have enough dopamine, to be able to get that energy to say, okay, I can do something. There's no very low self-esteem and stuff like that. So how can simple techniques of yoga, understanding your breath pattern, knowing that you're going through this, and simple yoga and Ayurveda tips can help? That has been your area of
Sure.
wellness also. So,
Sure, Nirmala ji, absolutely. Thank you so much for this question. And this is why the wellness practice at Rashram, we are not looking at wellness from disease perspective. It's a paradigm shift where we are looking wellness or well-being as a holistically a construct in itself. And it begins with everything we do. For example, what time do you wake up in the morning? Like in Ayurveda, there is a very strict, people find it strict, but there is a routine which is prescribed to be healthy. It's not easy to be healthy. Let me clarify this, right? Because the moment you understand that we are a part of nature, right? And therefore, there is sun in us, moon in us, stars in us, darkness in us, right? And our entire cycle needs to be connected with the universe. So we need to wake up with the sun, and post sunset, actually, our physical heart starts closing down. In Ayurveda, it's very beautifully written that the way a lotus, closes itself, right? It encloses itself. Our heart also becomes closed, and that's the time to relax. That's the time to go internal. And therefore, many religions advocate that you have your dinner before sunset. Post sunset, don't eat anything. And this creates a very healthy metabolism and a nourishment cycle. I mean, some time ago, I was in Sydney for my SP Jain sessions, and I was shocked at the Sydney airport. There was a wellness store. So, okay, now wellness has also become a $1 trillion industry. And that's the sad part, right? Because what I saw was tablets of melatonin and serotonin. Now, serotonin is actually a hormone secreted naturally within our system, which keeps us happy. And by doing simple yogic exercises, by breathing on rhythm, by following the sun's cycle, right? By spending time by doing what you enjoy. See, unfortunately, we have got caught up into such a rat race and hari culture that we don't even realize what am I enjoying, right? I mean, internationally, surveys say that there is no engagement at work. Now, engagement comes out of your joy in work. And unfortunately, a lot of HR tried, doing party on Friday evening to create happiness at work, which I feel is such a superficial way to help people become happy. This is the major difference between happiness in the West, which sees pursuit of materialistic pleasure as happiness. While when we look at our Indic wisdom, it says ananda. We don't even talk of happiness. We talk of sukha and ananda. So the word sukha comes, su is for auspiciousness. Anything which is good, right, is su. And kha is space. So a space has to be auspicious. The first space is our body, right? We live in our body, we live in our mind. So we have to keep our body and mind auspicious. Now imagine what a paradigm shift when we not look at our body to be able to fill with junk food, or mind to be filled with junk entertainment, right? But if we are supposed to keep it auspicious, then we end up eating organic food. Then we look at wholesome entertainment, not contaminated entertainment. And wholesome would be more of being with nature, listening to music that energizes, spending time with loved one, uh, painting. Artists can do different sculptures, or get into that painting. Where do we find time for joy in our life? When I do time management workshops, unfortunately, I have to actually make them write down that, okay, every day, 20% of my time I'll spend into enjoying my life. It's so sad that joy also, we have to put it up in a time management capsule, right? Because otherwise, see, anger, sadness, depression, they just happen. We don't need to invite them. But Ananda only comes when we are enjoying what we are doing, when we are living very rooted. Also in Ayurveda, the word for healthy person is swastha, right? Who is swastha? Swastha. So swa is myself. And anyone who's steady or rooted or grounded in self is a swastha person. And therefore, when we say mental health, any person whose mind is free of anger, sadness, they come and they can go like clouds, right? Because we are all human beings. So we are prone to various emotions. However, the moment we allow ourselves the luxury not to get attached to emotions, but see them as coming up and going away, you know, and this can be achieved by following pranayama, following yogic breathing exercises, following a diet which is wholesome, which is not just tasty, but which is giving us sattva.
That's a very nice way of putting it. So yeah, I think happiness has also become an industry. It is a ministry. There are capsules, serotonin. I've heard nasal sprays. So everything is a kind of package. It's like an app, right? You have an app for going from one place to other, and you have an app for happiness, and it's a bit
Absolutely.
ironic that that's where we have landed because we have forgotten connection with ourselves. In fact, there are techniques for stress relief. There are stress balls, and then sand kept in a bowl so that you can touch the soil, and then there are other techniques which are also around walking on a lawn so that you can have connection to nature and so on. So it's a bit ironic that we have to use these artificial ways of keeping the stress away rather than trying to be closer to nature organically and being part of the environment around us. Yeah, so yeah, hopefully we will not have this artificial ways and we can actually learn the way the life is meant to be lived. So I know there's a
Exactly.
lot of focus on self-leadership in the Rashtam School of Public Leadership, because as leadership, one of the important aspect is, so mental health, we can talk from the diseases perspective, but there's also unlimited potential that the human mind has. And there's so many things that we already know from many of our sages who used to have, just the spiritual power to really gain knowledge. And there are so many other techniques that are there even in the modern day, where it shows about the unlimited power that the human mind has. So tell me something about the focus on the self leadership, and how are we trying to focus on the leadership of self before we start leadership of the world. So at Rashtra.
Absolutely. So at Rashtam, the focus is main, it begins with self leadership, as you rightly said. And therefore, it begins with understanding who I am. And when I say who I am, we have to actually revisit. It's not a spiritual or a metaphysical question. It's actually a very physical question, because we don't even know our physiology. We don't study it. Unfortunately, we study biology in a very limited way. So we study a respiratory system, and we study a blood circulation system. And then we study a nervous system. But we really have no clue how our entire body is integrated. Secondly, as I said earlier, in the West, the psychology field came from understanding abnormal people. And therefore, there is no understanding in our curriculum even today about what is mind. While yoga and Ayurveda, these are the courses we have integrated into the Rashtam curriculum, where, and we are also offering various programs on different platforms where other people who are not a part of Rashtam can also do certificate programs, or get, shorter duration courses, where we help people to understand how, what makes up their mind, what is mind made up of, how does mind work. And that's where earlier my company's name was Tame the Monkey, and many people had asked me, you also had a smile when you mentioned Tame the Monkey. So it comes from Adi Shankaracharya, who had said that mind is like a monkey. and not only like a monkey, but a drunken monkey who's beaten by a scorpion. So imagine how much a mind keeps on jumping around, right? And it's sad that the West has been teaching today also leadership or even emotional intelligence as a cognitive skill. It's not a holistic way of being. To me, any leadership is a being, right? It's not a position, it's not a role, it's not even a course where you learn, because you have to unlearn lot many things, and you have to transform your own being to becoming a leader. And in India, in Indic wisdom, if you see in Sanskrit, the word for leader is neta, right? And neta comes from netra, netrutva, someone who's leading. So netrutva is not just leadership, but netrutva is having the vision clear. And when I say vision, as I showed this, not just these two eyes, but the third eye. So a neta or a netrutva is only possible by someone who has opened up her or his third eye. And that third eye gives you insights, not just data and information and knowledge, but it generates insights. And insights create transformation. And only individual transformation will create collective transformation. And only collective transformation would help humanity to live happily and healthily, not just by creating courses or creating ministries. So that's the long-term goal of Rashtam, to contribute at a larger level of humanity.
Wonderful, wonderful, Malaji. That's a really nice explanation about leadership and how self-leadership is important in any type of leadership that you aspire to have. Yeah, so that's about it for today. Thank you very much for your time. I hope your insights and knowledge helps many more leaders at Rashtam, and we inspire the generation through Rashtam to really take a deeper dive into self. We have human beings have been adventurous enough to go deep down the sea, way up in the skies, but let's deep dive inside us. There's a huge world to be uncovered among us, and there's huge potential to be uncovered. So wish everyone very happy and healthy mental and holistic health, and thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you, Nirmala.
Thank you.